The wind up here doesn't sound like wind anywhere else. You notice that first. Not the hunger that came and went days ago, a fire that burned itself out somewhere around day 12. Not the thirst, which is its own kind of silence now. It's the wind. It moves across bare rock with nothing to catch it. No trees, no grass, nothing soft for 30 miles in any direction, and it sounds like something breathing. A man sits on that rock. His skin has gone the color of the stone beneath him. His lips have split in 3 places. His hands, when you look closely, have gone still in a way hands don't usually go, still, not shaking, not fidgeting, just resting, like they've stopped expecting anything to reach for. And his mind, this is the part that should not be true, the part the body cannot explain. His mind has never been clearer in his life. You'd expect starvation to make a man stupid, slow, confused. But something else happens past a certain point. Something the desert fathers would later try to describe and never quite manage. The noise goes quiet. And in that quiet, something arrives that is not human, and it has a proposal. We'll get to that voice. And we'll get to what it offers him, every kingdom visible from that ridge, his, for one small act of betrayal. But not yet. Because before you can understand what happens on that mountain, you have to understand the number written over the top of it like a signature. 40 days, 40 nights. And if you go looking, you'll find that number again, and again, and again, scattered across 1,000 years of scripture, in places you'd never expect to find a pattern at all. Here's what most people miss. This is not a story about a number. This is not a math trick some ancient scribe hid inside 10 different books. This is not 40 different writers, separated by centuries, stumbling into the same coincidence by accident. Something is happening every time this number shows up, and once you see it, you will never read the words 40 days the same way again. Start with the first 40 in the whole story of the world. Noah spent over 100 years building a boat in a place that had probably never seen real rain, while his neighbors laughed at him from their doorways. You can imagine what that felt like, decades of hammering wood together for a flood nobody else believed was coming, decades of being the joke of every town he passed through. And then one day the joke stopped, the sky opened, and it did not close again for 40 days and 40 nights. Picture him inside that boat. Not steering it, there was nothing to steer toward, just floating, in the dark, listening to water fall on the roof for 40 days straight, while everything he had ever known dissolved beneath him. His neighbors, his childhood streets, every grave of every person he'd ever loved before the flood, gone underwater, while he sat in the dark with his family and the animals, and the sound of rain that would not stop. 40 days to erase a world. 40 days before God remembered him and made the waters recede. Grief first, always grief first. Before the new world, there is the drowning of the old one. Now move forward a few centuries to a mountain called Sinai. A man named Moses climbs it with nothing, no food packed, no water carried, nothing but the clothes on his back, and he stays up there for 40 days and 40 nights, receiving the law of God carved into stone by the hand of God himself. You have to sit with that image for a second. 40 days with no bread, face to face with the glory of the Almighty. And his own skin will come down from that mountain glowing so bright, the people will beg him to cover his face. Try to imagine 40 days like that, no meals to mark the time, no nights that feel like rest, just you and the weight of something too large to hold, changing you whether you're ready or not. But here's what most people skip past. While Moses is up there for 40 days being changed, the people at the bottom of the mountain are melting down their jewelry to build a golden calf. You'd think 40 days of waiting would be nothing. You've waited longer than that, for far smaller things. But give people 40 days of silence and no proof God is still working, and watch what they build instead. 40 days was long enough for God to give them everything they needed to be free. And 40 days was also long enough for them to decide they'd rather worship something they built with their own hand. 2 things happening at once, on the same mountain, in the same 40 days, one man being transformed by holiness, and one nation returning to what they knew before. That tension never leaves this number. 40 always reveals what's actually inside a person or a whole people while they wait. It will reveal what's inside you too, if you let it. Stay with me, because it happens again, almost immediately. God sends 12 men into the land of Canaan to scout it out. 40 days of walking through vineyards heavy with grapes, 40 days of seeing exactly what God had promised with their own eyes. 10 of them come back and talk about giants, fear dressed up as caution. But 2 of them, a man named Caleb and another named Joshua, come back with the same eyes, the same 40 days, and a completely different report. We are well able to overcome it, Caleb says. Same evidence, same number of days, opposite conclusion. And this is where it gets remarkable, and where it gets hard to hear. Because of the fear of 10 men, God turns that 40 days into 40 years, a year of wandering in the wilderness, for every day those spies spent scouting the land. An entire generation will die in the desert before their children ever set foot in Canaan. except for 2 men. Caleb, who trusted, and Joshua, who trusted. 40 years of consequence, carried by a whole nation because of what 10 men decided in 40 days. That should make you uncomfortable. It's supposed to. If a pattern like this is new to you, if you've never seen how many times this number shows up doing exactly this kind of work, that's exactly why this channel exists. Stories like this one live here every week. So if you want to keep noticing what most people read straight past, this is a good place to. Now go forward again, centuries later, to a prophet named Elijah, on what should have been the best day of his life. He had just stood alone against 450 prophets of a false god on Mount Carmel, called down fire from heaven in front of the whole nation, and won. You'd think a man like that walks away invincible. You'd think the fear is over for good. Instead, within 24 hours, one death threat from a queen named Jezebel sends him running into the wilderness alone, collapsing under a solitary tree, begging God to let him die. Here's what most people miss about that moment. It isn't weakness. It's what happens after the highest point of anyone's life, the crash nobody warns you about, the one that shows up right when you think you've earned some rest. And God's response is not a lecture. It's not even a command. It's bread, baked on hot stones. It's water, in a jar, close enough to reach without standing. It's letting him sleep, twice, before asking anything of him at all. And then it's 40 days and 40 nights of walking on that food, one foot after another across desert you and I will never have to cross, until Elijah reaches Horeb, the mountain of God, the same mountain, some say, where Moses once stood, not fixed in an instant. Carried, slowly, across 40 days, from suicidal exhaustion back to a voice he could finally hear, not in the wind, not in the earthquake, not in the fire, but in a sound so quiet the old translations call it a still small voice. That's the shape of this number. It doesn't fix you on day one, it walks you there. There's one more thing worth knowing here. In Hebrew, the word for 40 is Abba I am, and in the pattern of this book, it functions almost like a unit of measurement, the way we might say a generation or a lifetime, without meaning an exact count. And in Deuteronomy, when Moses looks back at the 40 years in the wilderness, he uses another word, ana, usually translated to humble, though it carries the sense of being emptied out on purpose, not punishment for its own sake, emptying, so something else has room to be poured in. Hold that thought, because the pattern turns almost comic with the next man. A prophet named Jonah is sent to a city called Nineveh, a city so violent that even Jonah, God's own messenger, wants to see it burn. You'd think a man running from God would want an easy assignment when he finally gives in. He doesn't get one. His entire message, once he finally goes, is one sentence: 40 days, and this city will be overturned. That's it. No sermon. No follow-up. 40 days of warning, and Nineveh, a whole city of people Jonah despised, puts on sackcloth and repents, down to the animals. And Jonah is furious. Not because it failed, because it worked. He sits outside the city, hoping God will still destroy it anyway, sulking under a withered plant like a man who has completely missed the point of his own 40 days. You've probably met a version of this in your own life, someone who got exactly what they prayed for and still couldn't be glad about it. That's not a small detail. That's the whole point, sitting right there in plain sight. 40 days can change a murderous city faster than it changes one bitter prophet's heart. The number does its work on whoever is willing to let it, and it does nothing at all for whoever isn't. Ask yourself which one you'd rather be. If you've made it this far, you already know this channel is about slowing down long enough to catch details like that, the ones buried in plain sight, in a book most people think they've already read. Stick around, because the biggest one is still ahead. Now we go back to that ridge. The wind that sounds like breathing, the man with cracked lips, skin gone the color of the stone beneath him, and a mind gone strangely clear in a way you would not expect from a body running on nothing. His name is Jesus, and Luke tells us he was led into that wilderness by the Spirit. Not accidentally, not as a punishment, but on purpose, specifically to be tested. 40 days, no bread, no water carried in. You can imagine what 40 days without food does to a person. By the end of it, every craving sharpened, every argument for giving in sounding perfectly reasonable. And at the end of it, when his body has nothing left to give, that is exactly when the voice arrives. Turn these stones into bread. Throw yourself from the temple, and let the angels catch you. Bow down to me, just once, and I will hand you every kingdom you can see from this mountain. The Greek word used for what's happening to him here is perazo, and here's what most people miss about that word. It can mean a temptation meant to destroy you, but it can also mean a test meant to refine you, the same way fire tests gold. Same word, two completely different outcomes, depending on what's actually being tested, and depending on what's already inside the person being tested. 40 days of starvation. And the enemy assumes hunger will make him weak enough to trade everything for one loaf of bread. Instead, 40 days of emptying reveals exactly what's been true about him the whole time. There was never anything to trade. This is not a story about willpower. This is not a story about a man simply being stronger than temptation because he tried harder than everyone else. This is not a story about gritting his teeth through hunger. This is the same pattern you've watched all the way through this video, playing out in its final and fullest form 40 days, emptying a person down to what's actually there, so it can be seen by everyone watching. The early church understood this better than we usually give them credit for. Centuries after this moment on the mountain, when the church set aside 40 days before Easter, what we now call Lent, they weren't inventing a new number out of nowhere. They were pointing straight back at this. Augustine, writing generations later, treated the number 40 as something deliberate woven through the whole of Scripture, not a coincidence 40 separate authors happened to land on by chance. The church fasted for 40 days because they'd read the pattern too, and they wanted their own lives shaped by the same math. And if you want a picture of it that has nothing to do with the Bible at all, look at the length of an ordinary human pregnancy, roughly 40 weeks. 40 weeks of something forming completely out of sight, unseen, in the dark, before it is ready to be born into the light. Nobody calls that 40 weeks a punishment. Nobody calls it wasted time. It's the only way a life like that ever gets made. That's what every 40 in this book has actually been. Not a sentence, not a delay, a gestation. So here's what to carry with you. First, the truth of it. Every single 40 in this book means the same thing. Noah's flood, Moses on the mountain, the spies in Canaan, Elijah's walk to Horeb, Jonah's warning, Jesus in the wilderness. Different centuries, different people, different stakes, but always the same math underneath. Something being stripped away, so something else has room to be formed. Second, what that means for you. If you are in a 40 right now, a wait that has no clear end, a diagnosis, a delay, a season where nothing seems to be happening on the surface, you have been reading it wrong if you've been reading it as punishment. It was never punishment. Not for Noah, not for Israel, not even for Jesus on that ridge. It was formation the whole time, happening in the dark, the way every hard thing worth becoming has ever been made. And third, the part that should actually change something in you tonight. Not one single 40 in this entire book, from Genesis to the wilderness outside Jerusalem, ever once ended in nothing. The flood ended in a rainbow. The mountain ended in a covenant. The wilderness ended in a promised land. The walk to Horeb ended in a voice Elijah could finally hear. Nineveh's 40 days ended in a city spared. And the 40 days on that ridge ended with angels coming to minister to the same man who had just refused every kingdom in the world. Every single one. Not one exception. Not once. So tell me, which 40 are you in right now, and which one of these stories did you need to hear tonight? Put it in the comments. I read every one of them. If this helped you see something in Scripture you'd never noticed before, that's exactly what this channel is for, so stay a while, and let's keep finding what's been hiding in plain sight the whole time. Because whatever 40 you're walking through right now, it is not the end of your story. It's just how the next part of it is being made.